1999, and we are addressing ourselves mainly to students. And this is a very good opportunity, and I thank Focus High School for letting us come here, and very grateful to Professor Jeevan Kumar, who has come from Bangalore to be on this program. And it is a pleasure for me to introduce him. He's an eminent Gandhian exponent and Vice Chairman of Sarvodaya International Trust, Karnataka Chapter. Professor Jeevan Kumar has been Professor of Political Science, Bangalore University, and Director of the Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Study and Research Center, and he has specialized in Gandhian studies. He has been visiting fellow in several international universities in the USA, in Austria, in Tokyo, and has participated in conferences in the USA, Germany, Belgium, France, Japan, Nepal, and Bangladesh. His area of specialization includes development politics and administration, Indian government and policies. The books that he has edited and written voice his social concerns. They include The Angry Voter, Uniting in Responsibilities in a Culture of Rights. Then, Excellence in Administration, Prospects and Perspectives. Professor Jeevan Kumar is actively engaged in promoting Gandhi's ideals and methods. At present, he is professor at the Karnataka School Development and Panchayat Raj University, Gandhi. Gandhiji practiced what he preached. When a mother came to him complaining that her son was eating too much sugar, he said nothing. When she reminded him that he didn't bother to reply to her, he said, "For 3 days, I tried not eating sugar myself. Now I can guide you." So he practiced always what he preached. Gandhi was unique in thinking out solutions to problems big and small. And he confronted himself with it. Confronted with the poverty of millions of Indians, he thought of ways they could help themselves, such as collecting salt. It was a unique solution. Indeed, self-help is the best help, and Gandhi experimented on himself on many health issues also, and then went on to help others. Now, Professor Jeevan Kumar is especially adept in speaking about Gandhi, and we are indeed fortunate, very fortunate indeed, to have him speak to us. Over to Professor Jeevan Kumar.
Thank you, Ismat ji. Good morning to all of you. This is my first exposure to Focus High School. I have looked at your profile, I've looked at the internet to gauge the kind of school that you're all privileged to study in. And let me compliment the principal, let me compliment the vice principal, and as well as the faculty for doing an excellent job, because your ratings on the net are very high. So Focus High School has been doing an admirable job, and when Ismat Mehdiji requested me on behalf of the Andhra/Telangana chapter of the Sarvodaya International Trust to speak to you on this occasion, tomorrow is Sarvodaya Day, tomorrow is the day when Gandhi was martyred. On that occasion, when I was invited to speak to all of you, I grabbed the opportunity because I don't miss an opportunity to share my thoughts on Gandhi. And therefore, I am before you now. I have a PowerPoint presentation, so I'll just share my screen in a while, and I'll speak as we go along. Can you see the screen? Can you see my PPT?
Yeah. Yes.
I'll just blow it up if it's possible. I don't know if I can blow it up. Just give me a minute. Yeah, okay, so here we go. When I was requested to suggest a title for my talk today, I thought I will give it this kind of a theme. Change begins with me. And I've given this subtitle, Gandhi's Leadership Style and its Contemporary Relevance. Given the nature of the audience, I thought I would speak to youngsters like you about something that has been quite close to my heart. I'll begin by this. I'll give you my outline also. These are the areas that I would like to cover. I'll take about half an hour, so you don't have to worry too much about the number of points in the outline. I'd like to begin with two basic questions. The first one being, who is a visionary leader? And could we say that Gandhi was a visionary leader? That's the first basic question I'd like to begin with. The second question would be as follows: which dimension of Gandhi's visionary leadership has contemporary relevance? That's the second part of my presentation, because I thought if you are looking at Gandhi and his leadership, perhaps we need to contextualize things to the present, bring it up to date. And therefore, I've looked at a contemporary theme for sharing my thoughts with you. I'll spend a little time looking at Gandhi and visionary leadership, because I'm convinced, and I'm sure quite a few of you also would be or are convinced, or perhaps would be convinced by the time I'm through, that we don't have too many visionary leaders in the galaxy of leaders who have made a difference to the world. There are, of course, varieties and varieties of leaders. But then whom would we call a visionary leader? I think Gandhi could be called a visionary leader, and I'll give you a few reasons why I think Gandhi qualifies. And then I come to the contemporary relevance of Gandhi's leadership style. This is where I would bring in the term sustainable development, and briefly talk to you about what Gandhi had to tell us about sustainability and sustainable development. And then the last two aspects, I would present to you a 5-point punch-shield, what I call a Gandhian punch-shield of sustainable development. I've tried to compress all that Gandhi has said into 5 principles. And then I would also place before you what I've described as my punch-shield of sustainable development. Actually, this should be titled Our Punch-Shield of Sustainable Development, because I'm going to place these 5 principles before you, and I'm going to request all of you young people particularly, whether you would share or whether you would like to adopt this punch-shield of sustainable development also. And I'll make a few concluding observations. So this is where I'm beginning with these 2 basic questions. The first one being, who is a visionary leader? And would Gandhi qualify to be called a visionary leader? This is what I think a visionary leader should represent. We may describe them as builders of a new dawn. These are leaders who base their leadership on an inspirational picture of the future. These are leaders who have a clear sense of direction. Not only are they clear about the goals, not only are they clear about the destination, but a visionary leader also knows how to get to that particular destination. Visionary leaders see what is called the big picture. Narrow leaders would look only at the immediate present. Those are narrow leaders. Those are very small-time leaders. Those are populist leaders, only worried about the present, and who are not able to see what is called the big picture. Visionary leaders are able to do this, and they also go a step ahead. Visionary leaders, they enunciate a vision based on principles. And as I told you earlier, I'm going to talk about Gandhian principles. I'm going to talk about Panchsheel, Gandhi's Panchsheel, can we adopt a similar Panchsheel, and so on. So these are principles. Whether they are 4, 5, or 10 or 15 principles, the number is not important. But do we have principles? Do leaders enunciate a vision based on principles that become guideposts for humanity? And Gandhi has given us several such principles. So along all these lines, I am convinced that Gandhi would qualify to be called a visionary leader. That's my answer to the first basic question that I've posed to myself and to all of you. The second basic question with which I'm beginning my talk to you this morning is as follows: which dimension of Gandhi's visionary leadership has contemporary relevance? And this is where I bring in the Gandhian vision of sustainable development, because that is, I think, in the current discourse. When we look at sustainable development and we look at the Gandhian vision specifically, when we look at how the world is looking at sustainability and sustainable development, and we try to juxtapose the Gandhian vision with this particular vision, we find that the Gandhian vision exposes the follies, the faults, the fault lines in the current model of development. Not only does Gandhi, if you compare and contrast the contemporary model of sustainable development with what Gandhi meant when talking about it, as I just told you, the fault lines are very clearly exposed. But does a leader like Gandhi merely expose follies, merely expose fault lines? But does a leader like Gandhi also give us a blueprint to rectify them? And this is what Gandhi does very clearly long time ago. Gandhi also gives us a blueprint to rectify the fault lines in our civilization, the fault lines in our policies, but then to take Gandhi seriously. And if we wish to take Gandhi seriously, if we wish seriously to rectify those follies, to rectify the fault lines, then Gandhi himself said, each one of us must be the change we wish to see in the world. This is going to be the focus of my discussion with you this morning. How can each one of us be the change that we wish to see in the world? A few introductory points about Gandhi, not that any of you needs to be told anything about Gandhi. Mahatma, great soul, Bapu, father of the nation, all of these things we are familiar with. I'm sure in your history lessons also you'll be studying about the role that Gandhi, in a history subject, you'll be studying about how Gandhi was instrumental in bringing freedom to India. You will also know that he was the national leader, that he was a freedom fighter. More than that, he was a humanist, that he was a social reformer. And above all, Gandhi would qualify to be called a visionary leader. Gandhi has been a source of inspiration, has been a role model for so many people, not just for common men, common people, but also for great leaders who have acknowledged that Gandhi has been their inspiration and role model. And two of them in the recent past come to my mind, the whole lot of them, including Barack Obama and many others. Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela immediately come to mind among the galaxy of leaders who have acknowledged that Gandhi was a source of inspiration for them. A question may be raised here as to whether Gandhi was a born leader. Those of you who are familiar with his writings, those of you who have read my story of my experiments with truth, would obviously know that Gandhi was not a born leader. If you read his early life, if you read the circumstances that he was thrown into, you would know that he was not. If you look at the pictures of Gandhi in his early days, you would know that he was not a born leader. He was a very shy person. He was scared of a lot of things. He was scared of the dark. Gandhi was scared of spirits coming to him in the dark and bothering him. Gandhi was scared of reptiles. Gandhi was, well, definitely not a born leader. But in the course of his life, you would find that he is slowly but steadily acquiring more and more leadership traits. Gandhi was a simple man. He led a very simple life, but then he believed in very strongly in certain values. And at the essence of these values would be these four values: truth, non-violence, equity, and justice would be perhaps the most important values that Gandhi not only believed in, but Gandhi very seriously practiced. So whether you're looking at Gandhi's values or whether you're looking at his personality or his leadership traits, well, all of these combined together was able to shake the mighty British Empire. And as all of us know, he was instrumental in bringing down the Union Jack and ensuring that we became an independent nation. Having said that, let me briefly share with you leadership styles, because I'm making a case here for describing Gandhi as a visionary leader. So we need to look at the theory of leadership. I'm not going into too many details, but one of those who has written extensively about leadership theories and leadership styles particularly is this psychologist by name Daniel Goleman, who conducted a lot of research. It's called evidence-based research, and it was an emotional intelligence. And he puts all this research together in his 2002 publication called Primal Leadership, with the subtitle Learning to Lead with Emotional Intelligence. There are many scholars who worked on leadership, but I'm picking up Daniel Goleman specifically because he describes 6 different styles of leadership. Top on his list are the visionary leaders. Then there is visionary leadership. Then you have something he calls coaching leadership. There is affiliative leadership. There is democratic leadership. There is pace-setting leadership. There is commanding leadership. So there are 6 varieties or styles of leadership that Daniel Goleman identifies based upon his evidence-based research on emotional intelligence and how people have been leading others across different countries, across different continents. The point that I'm making here is that most leaders, except the visionary ones, of course, the coaching, affiliated, democratic, pace-setting, and commanding, most leaders would believe that their job is to get things done. Most leaders assume that I don't have to do the work because I'm a leader now. My job is to get things done, meaning that you get others to do what you would like them to do. Most leaders, fall into this particular category. But what I'm saying here is that the visionary leader would belong to a different category. And how would we call Gandhi as a visionary leader? To my mind, Gandhi best fits the description of a visionary leader. Of course, let's ask the question, who is a visionary leader? And let's look at the answers and then see how Gandhi would qualify to be called a visionary leader. A visionary leader is an individual who sees the potential for how the world should exist and then take steps to get there. So there's an ideal scenario, an ideal world, which the visionary leader is able to visualize. And he says that this is the ideal world in which we all should live in. And then if this ideal world is non-existent, or this perfect world we have still not reached this particular state of a perfect world, then it's important that we try to take the steps to get there. And the visionary leader says, yes, I know how to set up that world, to create that world, and I will also guide you to reach that particular kind of a destination. So in order to do this, well, leaders need visionary purpose, they need personal optimism, they need boundless energy, they need a lot of qualities which visionary leaders are expected to possess. Okay, visionary leaders are the builders of a new dawn. They are leaders who work with imagination, work with insight, work with boldness. There's a power of intentionality that you see in them. There's a higher purpose that they're able to see, visualize, and are able to carry others with them to reach this particular higher purpose. Where exactly are the eyes of the visionary leader? Are they looking down as they are walking, or are they looking up, or are they looking ahead? And this third point makes it clear that the eyes of the visionary leader are on the horizon. They're not downward. They're not looking at the pebbles. They're not looking at the obstacles on the path. They're looking ahead. They're looking at the horizon. They're looking at reaching that vision that they have identified for themselves and for others. Okay, so these are visionary leaders who have enormous powers. And then to possess these powers, obviously you require vision, you require core values, you require to build these qualities. And I think that these are leaders who lead differently. If other leaders insist that others should do the things that they would like them to do, we find that Gandhi is a different kind of a leader. This brings me to the concept of change, which I put in the heading of my talk to you this morning, be the change. Because it's Gandhi's words when he said, I must first be the change I wish to see in my world. So here is a leader who believed in leading from the front. As I said earlier, most leaders would believe that leadership is all about getting things done. But here is Gandhi who says, I must be at the forefront of the activity, of the action that I want others to do. And this is called leading from the front. Whenever Gandhi, and if you read his life, if you read Experiments with Truth, and if you read what he has written subsequently also, the story of Satyagraha, the story of what he did, civil disobedience, be it in South Africa or be it in India, you will see that whenever Gandhi was faced with violence, whenever Gandhi was faced with injustice, you would find that he was there right at the front. He was there in the forefront protesting. He was in the forefront mobilizing. He was in the forefront to face the lathis, to face the bullets. Okay? And the tactics that he utilized were always non-violent, peaceful resistance, satyagraha, civil disobedience, non-violent action. These are the strategies that Gandhi used, which I'm sure you're familiar with. I'm also sure that all of you have seen Richard Attenborough's film Gandhi, which brings this out very vividly. Okay, so these are leaders like Gandhi buy into their vision. So when they're talking of an expansionist like Julius Caesar, or if you're talking of a peace-loving person like Martin Luther King, you find that these leaders saw a future which was quite different from the present, quite different from the way in which ordinary people looked at the present and the future. You find that these visionary leaders are quite different from the other kind of leaders. And as I said earlier, they have principles. These principles become guideposts for humanity. And these principles are based on what is described as ageless wisdom. And these are leaders who are able to synthesize this, the essence of the ageless wisdom, and then present it as something that needs to be done by people of the day. And I'll come to the second part of my discussion with you this morning, where I felt that just presenting Gandhi as a visionary leader and extolling his virtues, extolling his principles would not be good enough. I thought, let me now contextualize Gandhi's leadership style, by whatever name we may give it. I have called it visionary. You may wish to use a slightly different name or a different name altogether. But whatever, however we may describe Gandhi's leadership style, I think we need to contextualize, bring it to the present. We need to look at the contemporary relevance of Gandhi's leadership style. So this is where I'd spend a few minutes taking you into what environmental science students would be very familiar with. And all of you may not be students of environmental science. You may not even have that kind of a subject in your school. You'll be studying different sciences. Finally, when you finish your graduation and so on, you may, or when you come to college, you may have exposure to a science called environmental science. But now you'll be studying physics, chemistry, biology, and similar subjects. But from an environmental science perspective, I think it's important that we understand the present geological epoch in which we are in, and the fact that this geological epoch is called the Anthropocene. Experts tell us, environmental scientists tell us, that the Earth has entered a new geological epoch, and the name of this epoch is the Anthropocene. Who coined this term called Anthropocene? It was coined by Nobel laureate Paul Crutzen to capture the idea. There's a reason why the term Anthropocene is used. Anthropocene comes from anthropology, and anthropology is the study of human beings. You know this, obviously. And therefore, titling this geological epoch as the Anthropocene was done very deliberately by this Nobel laureate called Paul Crutzen, because it was clear to him at the beginning of the century that we human beings are very clearly overwhelming nature. This we've been doing for quite some time, as Crutzen points out to us. And in case you didn't know what the earlier geological epoch was called, that was called the Holocene. Okay, a little, some details about Holocene before we go on to the Anthropocene. The Holocene was the interglacial period of more than 10,000 years, we are told, that provided humanity with extraordinarily good living conditions. Okay, more than 10,000 years, and that was a period, Holocene. People were around, but people didn't have to struggle, people didn't have to suffer, people didn't experience the kind of problems that we are experiencing, with the problems we're experiencing with nature. That was the Holocene. But then with the Anthropocene, that's the epoch in which we are currently in, things have changed considerably. When did the Anthropocene begin? We are told that with the Industrial Revolution, some 250 odd years ago, the Anthropocene technically begins. And what did the Anthropocene do to human civilization is something I've just tried to compress in about 3 bullet points. The Anthropocene saw an enormous proliferation of the human population. The Anthropocene saw an enormous consumption of natural resources. The Anthropocene also saw an enormous dependence on fossil fuels. So ever since the Industrial Revolution some 250 years ago, and I'm sure you're also familiar with the fact that that was described 250 years ago, was described as the first Industrial Revolution. Since then, we've come a long way. And students of science would also know that from the first Industrial Revolution, we moved to the second, we moved to the third. And currently, we would also know that we are in the fourth Industrial Revolution. But in terms of the geological age, we're looking at the Anthropocene. And ever since then, the Anthropocene, we have been proliferating population-wise. We are consuming natural resources at an enormous rate, and we are still dependent so much on fossil fuels. As a consequence, thanks to the fact that the Holocene ended and the Anthropocene actually began, take a look at the state of the planet today. And I'm not going into details because I don't have the time to. I've just flagged some 7 or 8, defining characteristics of our planet today. I'm beginning with recurring pandemics because we are, we're meeting online. Had it not been, if the pandemic, which refuses to go away, if not for the pandemic and its variants, perhaps I may have been with you in Hyderabad, talking to you physically, talking to you, on a face-to-face basis. But then because of the pandemic and recurring pandemics, we are not able to do that. Online classes have become a reality. And so much of our activity is being conducted online. Well, I'm beginning with that, recurring pandemics. Moving on to the other bullet points: loss of biodiversity, extinction of species, rapid depletion of natural resources, pollution of water bodies, greenhouse effect, depletion of the ozone layer, global warming, and last but not the least, climate change. So these are the defining characteristics of our planet today. And I don't think any of you would disagree with me. Perhaps you may like some clarification. And at the end of the discussion this morning, I would love to give whatever clarifications you seek from me. You may say that this is not enough, sir. I've given you some 8 or 9 points here. You may say, no, there are many more points you would like to add. You're most welcome to add to these points. But the point I'm trying to make here is this, that we have messed up our planet substantially, especially since the beginning of the Anthropocene geological age. And this is something that we need to be extremely worried about because we are already facing the music of what we have been doing to the planet. How has the United Nations responded to all these challenges? Well, a brief timeline of what the UN has been doing. 1992, the famous Rio Earth Summit, 2002, 2012, World Summits on Sustainable Development. The most recent is the 2005, is what happened in 2005, when the United Nations General Assembly adopted what is called the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And today we have the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, which are a framework of 17 goals with as many as 169 targets. So the world has not been keeping quiet over what we've been doing to the planet. United Nations particularly has been quite active. And there are many more things one can add here. The UN Framework Convention on Climate Change and so on also needs to be added here, but I've not gone into too many details because my focus is on Gandhi. My focus is on linking up Gandhi with sustainable development. So this is the current scenario as far as the world is concerned, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and the entire world, including India, including the states, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Karnataka. We're all looking at how those 17 SDGs could be visualized by the deadline set for 2030. When did we begin to speak about sustainable development? Well, to briefly trace the origins of this term, you may have heard of the World Commission on Environment and Development. This was established by the UN General Assembly in 1982. You may have heard of Mrs. Gro Harlem Brundtland, a remarkable lady who was appointed chairman of the World Commission on Environment and Development. She was such a famous lady, Mrs. Brundtland, that the WCED came to be called popularly as the Brundtland Commission. And I'm sure you've also heard of the very famous report of the Brundtland Commission titled Our Common Future, which dates back to 1987. Now, this Brundtland Commission is important because the definition of what the term we frequently use today called sustainable development, the definition you find in the Brundtland Commission report, Our Common Future, where the report says sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. What does this Brundtland Commission say about sustainable development? A lot of things it says. I'll compress them into some 4 or 5 points for your benefit. Well, this this commission says environmental degradation is very clearly linked to man-made interventions. The Brundtland Commission recognizes that there are limits to growth, specifically biophysical limits to growth. This commission recognizes that the planetary ecosystem cannot sustain the high consumption rates of the industrialized world. This commission maintains that consumption patterns of the North are driven by greed, not need. This commission also acknowledges the responsibility of the present generation to future generations. This is the essence of the Brundtland Commission approach to sustainable development. Having said that, now the big question as to how do we relate Gandhi to the term sustainable development? Does Gandhi's idea of sustainable development and the Brundtland Commission perspective and the SDG perspective do they gel? Do they come together? That's the question I will try to answer presently. Gandhi's writings on sustainability are rich, extremely perceptive. A lot of people have acknowledged their debt to Gandhi. Environmental activists like Sundarlal Bahuguna, Baba Amte, Medha Patkar, Vandana Shiva, so many others have said that their understanding of the environment has improved thanks to a better reading of Gandhi's views on the subject. All of these and more have stated that Gandhi helped them to understand the problem of sustainability and sustainable development, not from a narrow perspective, but from a holistic perspective. You may ask, during Gandhi's time, more than 100 years ago, were environmental issues and concerns of serious concern? The answer is no, definitely not. In Gandhi's time, we had not messed up the planet so seriously. In Gandhi's time, much of the term that we're using today, the ozone depletion of ozone layer or other terms that we're using, were not used during Gandhi's time. Even the term sustainable development is a term that was not used by Gandhi. But nevertheless, Gandhi was deeply concerned about the potential for damage to the environment by modern industrial civilization. As early as 1909, in a famous little booklet of his titled Hind Swaraj, you will see how beautifully he portrays his concern for the environment and how he visualizes that if modern industrial civilization were to progress the manner it is progressing. And please note that when Gandhi was looking at the world, looking at industrialization, he was looking at the fallout of the first industrial revolution. Now, already he was able to visualize the damage the first industrial revolution with coal, with steam engines and so on. He was able to visualize what would happen to the world, to the planet, if this modern industrial civilization were to assume different avatars, different manifestations, and so on. So I finally come to the second last part of my discussion with you, where I said, if you read Gandhi very carefully and understand how he looks at sustainable development, perhaps all that is written about sustainability and sustainable development could be compressed into 5 principles, and I've called this a Gandhian Panchsheel of sustainable development. I'll begin with trusteeship, because when Gandhi says resources available on the earth are not to be used as if they are infinite, we've got to acknowledge the fact that resources are finite, and therefore resources are not meant to be used with an element of greed. And that's the essence of his doctrine of trusteeship. When Gandhi preached ahimsa, he was talking about practicing non-violence not only towards other human beings. Gandhi's concept of ahimsa extended beyond fellow human beings, also towards other living creatures, elements, also other non-living elements. This was a comprehensive understanding of the Gandhian concept of ahimsa. That's point number 2. Point number 3, Gandhi said that we as a human race must keep thinking about how much is enough for us to lead simple, need-based, austere, yet comfortable lifestyle. He didn't believe that we should all, have just, bare clothing on our shoulders. We should have just one meal a day and so on. Gandhi didn't believe that we should live lives of poverty. But he said each of us, whatever our income and whatever our standing, whatever our status, he said we should think about how much is necessary for us to keep body and soul together. And therefore, he writes extensively about simple lifestyles, need-based lifestyles, austere lifestyles. At the same time, one should be comfortable. He was not trying to compromise on comfort by saying that we need to be simple, need-based, austere, etc. So that's the third in the Gandhian Panchsheel that I am flagging before you. The fourth, when Gandhi says all development as far as possible should lead to local self-reliance and equity with social justice, well, the Gandhian concepts of Swadeshi become very important. The Gandhian concept of Sarvodaya become very important. These are rich concepts, and they have been elaborated very extensively. People have even done doctoral research and written theses about Swadeshi, Sarvodaya, and so on. I'm not going into the essence. Sorry, I'm not going into details. I'm just trying to tell you that in our understanding of Gandhi and sustainable development, you also got to bring in his concept of Swadeshi and his concept of Sarvodaya. And last but not the least, Gandhi believed that in resource use, as said earlier, if resources are not infinite, if resources are finite, then we've got to be very careful in the way in which we, quote unquote, exploit the natural resource. So this is the Gandhian Panchsheel of sustainable development. Now, based on this Panchsheel, what I'm doing next is to place before you what I've titled my Panchsheel of sustainable development. Now, when I say my, please don't think it is mine. Please don't think it is Jeevan Kumar's Panchsheel. I want each one of you today, on this occasion, to say that this will also be my Panchsheel of sustainable development. If each one of you will take this Panchsheel very seriously, I think we can collectively do something to what shall I say, to stem the rot or to halt the damage that we are doing to the natural environment. Okay, so just take a look at these 5 principles, my young friends, and let me know, especially when we're interacting with each other, whether this would be easy for you to follow, whether you will straight away after reading 5 principles say, yes, I'm going to adopt this, or will some of you say, sir, we already are practicing this, we know what all of this, we are students of Focus High School, you don't have to tell us this. If you were tell me that, I would not be disappointed, I would be extremely happy. But I think there's a lot that we continue to do in order to promote sustainable development, in order to halt the damage that we're doing to the planet. Okay, so the first of my punch shield says, I will practice responsible consumption. In fact, if I were to be with you physically, I would ask you if you're ready. Well, why don't you stand up? And why don't we all say this together, that each one of us would, if you're not doing it already, say that I will practice responsible consumption. And that's a big term that we're using here, responsible consumption. Are we responsible consumers? Well, I can go on and on just talking to you about responsible consumption, but I assume since you're students of a very prestigious and a very leading, a good school, an excellent school in Hyderabad, I'm sure you would know what responsible consumption means or responsible consumerism actually means. That's number one. The second in the punch shield, I will follow the 4 R's of sustainability. Some of you may say that earlier there were only 3 R's. I would agree with you. Earlier there were only 3 R's of sustainability: reduce, reuse, recycle. But today, thanks to environmentalists and thanks to an better understanding of Gandhi, we have the 4th R added to sustainability. And the 4th R says our duty is not just to reduce, reuse, and recycle. We have also to restore or recharge or replenish that which we are taking away from the natural resource base. So there are 4 R's of sustainability. And would you take this pledge today that I will henceforth follow the 4 R's of sustainability? That is, if you're already not following this, number 2. Number 3, I will be conscious of food miles. Do I need to explain what food miles are? Or would students of Focus High School tell me, we know what are food miles, we've been told about it by our teachers, we practice it, we are conscious of it? I would be delighted to hear to get this response from you. Likewise, like food miles, there's another term called water miles. Okay, we are going to face water scarcity very much. I'm not sure what the position of Hyderabad is today, but Bangalore is already facing water shortage. Bangalore is dependent on water that is pumped up at least 100 kilometers from the river Kaveri, and the river Kaveri may not be able to sustain the way Bangalore is growing by leaps and bounds. So this means that when we have access to water, potable water, are we conscious of where this water comes from? And would we be conscious of using this water very sparingly, knowing that there is something like water miles behind the water that is given to me either in a plastic bottle or kept at my dining table? And the fifth principle is, I will be conscious of my ecological footprint. Again, do I need to tell students of Focus High School what ecological footprint actually means? Do I need to tell you how to measure the size of your individual ecological footprint? Do you know how big the ecological footprint of somebody of your age is in a country like the US or in a European country? And would you be conscious what the size of your ecological footprint would be based in Hyderabad as a citizen of Hyderabad or as a citizen of India? It's important for us to know what ecological footprint means, to be able to measure it based upon the consumption of resources. And this is a term that environmental science has been telling us for quite some time. So I'm almost through, my young friends. But my intention today, on this occasion when you wanted me to share my thoughts with you on Gandhi, and when I said I would title my talk, Be the Change, I'm saying that if each of us, taking inspiration from Gandhi, were to say that at a very minimum, these 5 principles of sustainable development, which I may not be conscious of, or which I've been conscious of, but not implementing that seriously, I will do so. And this punch shield is something that I would like you to note down, something that to read every day, something to be practiced every day. And I'm sure with Ismat Mehdi and Sarvodaya International Trust, we can do activities to find out how you are doing this. We can meet again and again. We can give you projects on how well you've understood this concept, how you're practicing this concept, and perhaps we can even give awards to those of you who are doing this much better than the others. So with this, I come to my concluding observations, where I'm stating that the current state of the planet is a serious cause for concern, and I'm sure all of you are aware of this. I'm flagging again COVID-19, the frequency and number of new zoonotic diseases. COVID-19 and Delta, Omicron, and so on are just variants of COVID-19. Where do they come from? We must know that they originate in animals, they're transmitted to us, and that these zoonotic diseases have risen drastically over the last century. Every year, WWF is telling us 3 or 4 new zoonotic diseases are emerging. And according to WWF, zoonotic diseases are very clearly linked to environmental causes. Average global temperature is set to increase between 1.3 degrees to more than 5 degrees Celsius by the end of the 21st century. And all of you would be around by the end of the 21st century. And I think it's important for you to particularly take note of what we are doing to a planet and the kind of global warming that is happening. Are these avoidable catastrophes? Be they zoonotic diseases, be it environmental devastation, be it global warming, be it climate change, are these avoidable catastrophes or are they unavoidable catastrophes? If you look at it from a Gandhian perspective, we would have to make this observation that these are avoidable catastrophes, meaning that these are things that need not happen. And if you, once you take that kind of a position, you will realize that we need to do 2 things if you are serious about preventing the emergence of new zoonotic diseases, if you are serious about halting environmental devastation, if you're serious about mitigating climate change, then I think, my young friends, there are 2 things that we need to do, which I've already told you about, but I'm just summarizing that here for you. We need to comprehend the implications and consequences of the current consumptive model of development that all of us seem to be involved in some way or the other. And if we are able to comprehend the implications and consequences of the kind of consumption that we are now victims of, then the second step is just waiting to be taken. We need to take corrective action by adding our punchil to the Gandhian punchil of sustainable development. This, my young friends, is the message that I would like to leave you with. There are 2 quotes of Gandhi, 2 of my favorite quotes on Gandhi. One, the earth is enough for every man's need, but not for every man's greed. And the second favorite quote of Gandhi's, which I've already used earlier, says, I must first be the change I wish to see in my world. So my young friends, I hope I've been able to share my message with you. There are a lot of reading material for you. The first one, Collected Works of Mahatma Gandhi, voluminous 100-volume work, which earlier would occupy a lot of shelves, but now you can even get this on the net. Collected Works, 100 volumes, 97, 98 of them, all carry wise words of Gandhi arranged alphabetically, indexed and so on. 2 volumes are the nature of an index. If you want to know more about leadership I spoke to you about earlier, Dan Coleman's book can be accessed by you. Canberra came up with a Charter of Global Greens. The best book on sustainable development I've read so far is by Susan Baker. And then I've written a few articles and articles on sustainability. So these are the references, and I would like to thank you for your patience. I'm through, ladies and gentlemen, my young friends, but I'm sure there'll be a scope for interaction with you. I'm not sure whether you would come on and ask questions directly or whether I would have to read the chat box. But anyway, thank you very much for your time. And thank you, Ismat Mehdi ma'am, for inviting me to Focus High School, which is one of Hyderabad's very prestigious schools. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Saab. If you have any questions, can you please type it in the chat box? We won't be able to unmute. There are a lot of people. There could be a chaotic situation. So please, if you have any questions, we'll take a minute to register your questions in the chat box. Thank you.
I hope that wasn't too heavy for the young students.
was wonderful. I mean, it was very enlightening. Thank you so much for those insights.
Okay.
So, Smatapa, would you like to conclude with a few words, or shall we end the session? You are on mute, Smatapa.
Now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you very much for a very inspiring, illuminating talk. I mean, this is so well presented, very scientifically, and there are many terms I didn't know myself. So I think I have to go to Focus High School to be one of the participants who are inspired by you, to join them or to lead them. So I'd like to ask you,
Yes.
have you practically done this with some groups in Bangalore? And if so, could you give an example to our young students?
Yes, I have many ideas along these lines.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to promote these ideas among school. You know, whenever I'm invited here and there, I do share similar thoughts with them. If I were physically to be present at a school and say this is the punch sheet, earlier I had 10 points, then they said 10 is too much, so I've reduced that to 5. So I keep doing this, and the response when I'm physically present is very encouraging, Ismat ji. If I were to say now, like, will you stand up and take a pledge? They're all very, very diligently stand up and say, okay, will repeat after you. I will practice responsible consumption and so on. This they do, but then as a follow-up, if I were to tell them, will you take up a project? Will you take up a project to, for example, measure the size of your individual ecological footprints? Will you do a little project on measuring the food miles? So what is it that comes to your plate every day? Do you know from where it comes from? Is it from a local market? Is it from an international market, and so on? They say yes, but then follow-up action, unfortunately, has not been very encouraging, Ismat ji. I keep promoting these ideas. I keep, dangling carrots and saying we'll give prizes, we'll do this, and so on and so forth. It has not been forthcoming. Even when I was in Delhi once, I went to the Center for Science and Environment, and I must also share this with you. Science and environment, tells you how you can, size, how you can, measure the ecological footprint of a school. Okay, would Focus High School be called a green school? Schools can be called green schools if they do so many things. If they do, for example, rainwater harvesting. Number two, if that water which is harvested is reused. Okay, if they don't allow the water from the bathrooms, just to go into the sewage drains, if that water, which is called grey water, is recycled. Okay, if they have X number of plants in the campus, trees growing in what's the green cover in the campus. So there are indicators by which schools could be labeled as green schools based upon a set of criteria that Center for Science and Environment, New Delhi, has done. You heard of Sunita Narayan and the very famous journal Down to Earth. Okay, so I met people there in Delhi when I went there and said, see, I'm a university student. I deal more with colleges and so on and so forth. So you've done this for schools. Can you also do something similar for colleges? They said they would get back to me, but they haven't done it. Okay, so my experience in trying to promote green consciousness, either among students, either in schools, in institutions, has not been very encouraging. And therefore, but I refuse to, be disappointed. Whenever I get a chance to speak to young people, I speak to them about this. Some of them have made an effort to come to visit my home. I say I live in a green home. Would you care to visit me? So I had a few students from environmental science taking me up on this offer because we have not used much cement, we have not used much steel. Our bricks, we live in a brick house. When we direct people to the house, we say that's the open brick house that you will find in our lane. In the whole locality, there is no other house, open brick house. We still use tiles. We have done rainwater harvesting. We have solar and all that and so on. So students have come to size me up, to take me on to see where they were doing things and so on. But as a project, which I am also saying with the Telangana chapter of SIT, could we, with Focus High School, with other schools, tell them, share with them the CSC concept of a green school? Can we promote that? Because then it means that all the stakeholders, all the students would have to be involved in the effort at, labeling a school, being labeled as a green school and so on. So things can be done still, but I suppose it needs an impetus. It needs a little direction from some of us who may be still, wanting to do things differently than the way things are happening.
Professor, there's a quick question from one of the participants.
Yeah.
She's asking, in this age of social media and propaganda,
Yeah.
sir, what do you suggest students know about the legacy of Gandhi?
That's a good question. I think this is asked by Ifat Jahan. Thank you, Ifat Jahan, for a very, very nice question, because I'm sure in this age, in this century, all of you are very conscious of social media. All of you are using the tools of social media and so on. So it's good, and Gandhian institutions are also very progressive in this direction. I myself am on social media, and I am a member of at least 2 or 3 Gandhian groups where we share, similar thoughts and ideas with each other. We share events, we share programs, we share activities with each other and so on. So there's a lot of scope in social media to spread ideas about the legacy of Mahatma Gandhi. Those of you who are interested. Okay, thank you. Those who are interested, I could share with you some of these Gandhian sites, even websites, and you may want to either join them or be a recipient of what is happening and so on. The legacy of Gandhi is being promoted in quite a big way. Those of you who don't know may have to begin at a certain level. I can introduce you to institutions which are offering short-term courses on Gandhian thought, of the legacy of Gandhi. I was involved in a project with IGNU, Delhi, where we put together a variety of courses, all to be offered online, be it a certificate course, be it a diploma course, be it a other courses, postgraduate courses, and so on. So a variety of courses, the curriculum and so on, we put together for IGNU. If you go into IGNU website, you will know what kind of courses are being offered by IGNU on Gandhi and so on. So if you're interested very seriously, and others from the particular school, please get in touch with me. Ismat ji has my mobile phone and my email and so on. I could connect you with people who are doing things to share the legacy of Mahatma Gandhi. This media needs to be explored very well. There's a fascinating book, in fact, titled Music of the Spinning Wheel, which goes into how 21st century electronics, IT revolution could play a very important role in propagating the legacy of Mahatma Gandhi. Thank you for the question. Are there any other questions? There's some disturbance from my side also. There's some drilling work going on. I'm sorry about that. Are there more questions? I don't see any on the chat box.
Yeah, I think we have to practically do things in limited ways.
Yeah.
Limited ways. I mean, it cannot be very broad-based. So starting with, that's why we focus on schools, because today's students are tomorrow's leaders. And actually, there is a lot of deficiency in our leadership, I think.
Yes,
so,
yes.
So that is why it is so important to focus on students, and
right.
Students should be involved in small projects to begin with,
right.
not very large, which get diluted, and take 1 or two of your points,
Yeah.
a water miles or food miles or whatever,
Yeah.
and we can go ahead with that. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Okay.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sir, myself, Muhammad Shoaib from Mashrabad by Son, sir. If you are interested in Gandhian thought, what we have to do, sir?
Okay, that's a very broad question. One is to understand Gandhi, because a lot of misconceptions are there, especially among people of your generation about Gandhi. It all depends upon where you're getting your ideas about Gandhi from. If you're getting it from textbook, getting it from a school teacher and so on, that should be all right. But if you're getting it from the wrong sources, you may not be able to get a correct perspective of what Gandhi believed in, what he stood for. That's the first answer to your question. We need to understand Gandhi from a certain perspective, which I would describe as the correct perspective, because whatever you hear from others about Gandhi, and I've been also hearing this, I've had to defend this on many an occasion. Gandhi was responsible for partition. Gandhi was very unkind to his family. Gandhi did not practice what he preached. Gandhi was a communalist. Gandhi was this, that, and so on. So a lot of misconceptions. The first thing would be to understand the man properly from the right kind of sources. Okay, that's the first thing to do. The second thing to do, and that's what I thought I would share with you this morning, share with you this morning, is now why do we why have you why have I been invited today on this occasion to share my thoughts with you on Gandhi? Other people are also invited to your institution. What's the purpose behind inviting people to share their thoughts with you? People with experience, people with knowledge, etc., etc. There's a purpose behind institutions inviting others. The idea is to inspire you to do things where you can make a difference. This is where I titled my talk today, Be the Change. So if you would agree with me that the planet is in a mess, if you agree with me that we all need to do something because that we're all going downhill, the Anthropocene is taking us all downhill, and there'll come a point of time by the end of the century when the resources would be depleted so much that there would be, people are saying the next wars would be fought over resources. The next world war would be over resources, and resources could be just drinking water or potable water. That's the rate at which we're exhausting a resource. So if you believe that we need to learn from visionaries like Gandhi to do things differently, to be the change that we wish to see on the planet, then I think Gandhi becomes very important for us. First, understand him selectively, of course. If you don't want to look at Gandhi on communalism or Gandhi on religion or Gandhi on something else, forget it. If you want to look at how I have looked at Gandhi today, Gandhi and sustainable development, then it becomes important for you to do something to be able to repair the mess that the planet currently is in. And you may say planet is too big an area. I say fine. Nation is too big a land. Okay, fine. Hyderabad city. I am in Hyderabad. What can I do in Hyderabad? The same Panchsheel that I told you about could apply as much to Hyderabad or to your locality or even to your school as much as it would apply to the entire planet. So you have to draw up a list of things, doable things, as Ismat Mehdi ma'am said. Not big projects that you would find that would overwhelm you, small projects that you can take up. So, okay, I will do this. I will spread the knowledge about ecological environmental consciousness in my community or in my locality. I will ensure that the corporation is doing things to segregate garbage. I will act as a warden, or I will help the corporation to ensure that people are segregating dry waste and wet waste. I will ensure that my city is cleaner. I will ensure that we don't waste electricity, that we don't waste energy, that we don't overconsume. Okay, so you can drop a small list of doable things that you think you can do. You can spread the word. You can form small eco clubs in your class, in your school, and say that, okay, you can give it a nice name. You can seek Ismat Mehdi's help to sponsor some activities from Sarvodaya International Trust and say that if we do this, well, would you be able to publicize? Would you be able to bring us together? You can interact with students of other schools and say, okay, can we do competitions to promote green consciousness? There are a lot of things you can do, but Gandhi becomes important here because he was a doer. He was a change agent. And he tells us that the first thing is to understand the reality. The second thing is to make a difference to that reality, because if you and I don't make a difference, then we're all going downhill. And the planet, with the rate at which it's going, I quoted pandemics, I quoted global warming, I quoted climate change. We're all going to be in a mess. Of course, people of my generation will not be around, but you will be around. And I don't want any of you to face the mess that we are currently going, leading up to. Thank you for the question, and I hope you will do something about it. Anybody else?
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
You can bring it to include.
Okay, I think it's time to bring it to conclusion. Thank you, Professor Jeevan Kumar Sahab, for this illuminating session. And I hope we'll continue to benefit from your insights into Gandhiji's leadership style. Thank you, Professor Sudmehdi, for organizing and motivating us to do this session. Thank you, all the participants. It has been a great pleasure to have you here. Thank you all. You all have a nice and safe day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I guess I can leave now.
Thank you very much for coming, Professor.
My pleasure. We have not.
At
we have
very short notice, you gave us such a brilliant presentation. And we certainly are inspired. I'm sure some of us are. So we will be in touch. When you come here, do meet us.
Sure. I'd like to meet you personally. And if I can go to the school, I've read so much about Focus High School.
No.
I'm in Hyderabad. I'd also like to visit the school and
we'll take you there.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm leaving now. I have some other work to be done. Thank you once again. And we'll be in touch.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.